so I hit the go live button. Let's see when it responds. Take my glasses off. I got the circle light going. All right. 1 second. All right, so we're live. All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Another live stream. I hope to do more live stream with guests. Last week I had Jason from another Jags podcast on, and today we have Jordan DeLugo from Generation Jaguar. He does all the website stuff, all the graphics for the Instagram. He does a lot of writing for the website and just everything else involving Generation Jaguar. Jordan, welcome to the channel.
Hey Dalton, thanks for having me on. Good to talk to you. Excited to talk some football. It's been a while since I've been able to, kind of sit down and just talk with a friend about what's going on in the NFL and with the Jaguars and all that good stuff. So happy to be on. Appreciate you for having me and ready to get to it.
All right, sounds good, man. So how do you feel about this whole entire how do you feel about the Jaguars draft this year, man? I mean, the Jaguars went in with 12 picks. Not many people thought that they would be using all the picks, and I know a lot of people have mixed feelings about it all. A lot of people are used to getting like a bunch of players kind of falling to them, but it seems like a little bit of a lukewarm reaction from a bunch of Jaguars fans. Like, what were your overall thoughts about this draft class?
Well, for me, I was one of those people you can count as did not think they would end up taking all 12 picks. But because they did end up using the 12 picks, they really don't have to have as high of a hit rate when you look at it long term in terms of how many of these guys end up hitting and being good players for them. So that is a little bit unique to where their percentages, they have a 50% hit rate on this class. They're sitting there with 6 really good players down the road. So they had a little bit more leeway with this class. Having said that, I still did grade the draft for the Jaguars based on how I felt about each individual pick. And for now, I've given them a B grade for the draft class. But like I said, because of the depth that they have with this class, it's very possible that it could end up being an A+ if they just hit on about half the guys.
Yeah, and I feel like that's one thing because the Jaguars, like as Jaguars fans, there's been years where like we've had star players, guys that were projected to go to us in like the top 5, even fall to us in the second round. I mean, look back at the 2016 draft, like Jalen Ramsey, fell to us at number 5, but then all of a sudden we got Miles Jack in the second round. Something similar happened in 2019 where Josh Allen fell to us at 7, and then right tackle Jawan Taylor, somebody that was projected to the Jaguars at number 7 in the draft, all of a sudden kind of fell to the second round. And, this year it didn't really seem like there was the same kind of things falling to us. Like, I mean, we were extremely close to maybe getting like Derek Brown or an Isaiah Simmons at number 9. Then, we saw CeeDee Lamb falling. So, I mean, I think a lot of Jaguars would have been extremely excited if we came out with like Isaiah Simmons and CeeDee Lamb. But, it's just the way it was all happening, just guys didn't necessarily fall to us. So, I don't think that the Jaguars were necessarily reaching. I mean, if you look at, especially, I mean, we'll go ahead and go over like, some of the picks, in the first round, like CJ Henderson, a lot of people kind of thought we reached, but then you all of a sudden saw a bunch of cornerbacks kind of come off of the board. So, we'll go ahead and start with with the first pick for the Jaguars. At number 9, the Jaguars drafted cornerback CJ Henderson out of Florida. Like, what were your overall thoughts of this draft selection?
So it wasn't surprising to me that they took Henderson with who was off the board. I think a lot of people had kind of penciled him in, if Derek Brown, Isaiah Simmons, guys like that were off the board, there was a good chance CJ Henderson was going to be the pick. And obviously if Jeff Okudah was off the board as well. I think that for me, it was a slight reach. He was my 15th ranked player, but the drop off between Henderson to the next corner and on my personal board, and I believe probably a lot of NFL teams' boards, was fairly significant. I still had some other corners in the first round, but it was more towards the bottom of the first round. And like a lot of people have talked about, Henderson has all the coverage ability in the world. He has all the length you want, the athleticism, all the traits are there. The only thing you see that you don't love all the time is every once in a while he has a play where he looks pretty uninspired in terms of tackling. But it's not that he can't tackle, it's that sometimes it just doesn't look like he's really into trying to sacrifice his body. And that could have been him making business decisions his final year at Florida. It could have been him battling through injuries. A lot of people have talked about that he was battling through injuries most of the season. So overall, I'm totally fine with the pick. Slight reach on my board, but considering how talented he is compared to the rest of the corners that went after him, I have no problem with the pick at all. And considering the need that the Jaguars had at cornerback.
Yeah, and like the thing with cornerback, it's getting more and more important really every year as just more NFL teams are passing the ball a lot more. And nowadays, it's not good enough to have one great wide receiver. You know, most of the successful teams have, you know, two, three, or just multiple wide receivers. And the Jaguars had a huge hole at cornerback. And, you know, now they have a plug and play starter at that cornerback one spot. And, you know, he's a guy that's lengthy. He's a guy that's very speedy. And I mean, you can't necessarily coach speed, or, you know, it's harder to kind of coach like coverage. A lot of times you have that or you don't. But, you know, when it comes to tackling, like, he knows how to tackle. But and I think you know, inside the locker room, I really think that when they're reviewing tape, he can almost be pressured into tackling people, just because, you know, I don't know if it's in the back of his head that, look, you know, I'm not getting paid in college if I don't want to get hurt. So, you know, I don't know how much that's in the back of, you know, cornerbacks' minds, but I don't think that's necessarily going to be an issue at the, you know, at the NFL level. But you know, we got a consensus kind of like number two corner, like the cornerback in this draft class. And, you know, a lot of teams like the Falcons, they were desperately trying to trade up, you know, past us to get him, but then they wind up kind of reaching on a guy like AJ Terrell. I mean, it kind of shows the importance of like what teams place on cornerbacks in this league. But I mean, yeah, they kind of, you know, that kind of happened. So CJ Henderson, he's kind of an anti-Jalen Ramsey, where Jalen Ramsey was, you know, he was an ego and he was a kind of a locker room character. And, you know, CJ Henderson's been kind of described as being low maintenance, and, you know, he just doesn't have the kind of personality that Jalen Ramsey has. He's a lot more introverted, you know, kind of similar to AJ Boye, where they're not going to go out and run their mouths a lot. So, you know, I think at the end of the day, this will be a good pick for the Jaguars, despite how a lot of Jaguar fans will bring up the Florida defensive player in the first round, which, you know, I understand when people say that, but I mean, just me, in my opinion, I don't agree with that sentiment at all. But, you know, that's just me. So we'll move on to the
scouting will get you every time.
What's that?
You don't want to do that. You don't want a helmet scout, you know?
Yeah.
Any player from any school could bust at any position. It has nothing to do with guys coming from Florida.
Exactly. And like, I mean, like CJ Henderson has anything to do with Derek Harvey. And I mean, you look at it, and Reggie Nelson, he was a good cornerback. We just didn't play him right. And we tried to eventually play him at safety. Like, he went on to the Cincinnati Bengals, and, you know, he was a star player out there. He was a Pro Bowler. So I mean, I just you know, I don't agree with that at all. But, you know, I understand why you know, why people ask that. But, you know, next we'll move on to the second of our first round picks, the picks acquired via the Jalen Ramsey trade, one of 3 draft picks. We have a 2021 first round pick from the Rams, as well as a 2021 fourth round pick. This year we used the first of them at number 20 for edge rusher / outside linebacker Colin Chaisson. Jordan, what were some of your thoughts about this draft pick?
Yeah, he was actually literally one spot behind CJ Henderson for me on my board. He's the edge 2 in this class, behind Chase Young, obviously. I had him in front of all the other edge rushers. When you look at like AJ Epinesa, Yetur Gross-Matos, some of the other guys. So getting him at 20, I saw that as a slight value, you know, having him at 16 on my board. I think that a lot of people like to go look at the box score and scout that way. And I understand you do want to produce in college, but this guy's a redshirt sophomore coming off a 2018 ACL injury, and he really developed throughout the season. And as the season went on, the LSU coaching staff allowed him to kind of rush the passer a lot more. And down the stretch, he was really good. His last 4 games were against Texas A&M, Georgia, Oklahoma, and Clemson. And his pace in terms of statistics for those 4 games, if you projected that over a whole season, he would have ended up with like 15 sacks, 17 tackles for loss, 50 pressures, 50-something tackles. So this is a kid that, in my opinion, because he's a redshirt sophomore, he was kind of like where Josh Allen was for reference after Josh Allen's junior season. Josh Allen went back to school and he ended up having the monster senior year for Kentucky, getting 17 sacks, 21 tackles for loss, etc. I think if K'Lavon Chaisson had decided to go that route and go back to LSU for another year, he would have ended up with a season kind of like that next year. He really turned it on, kind of showed a more diverse and consistent pass rush arsenal of moves. He's pretty stout against the run for a guy that you expect to be primarily a pass rusher, and he can also drop into coverage in shallow zones. I don't really think you want him covering tight ends down the seam, but if you're talking about having him drop into a shallow zone in the intermediate part of the field, he can do that as well. So I think it was a great pick. I like it more than the Henderson pick value-wise, and I think that getting another edge rusher to be kind of like a Robin to Josh Allen's Batman is going to be really fun.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I really like Chaisson coming out of LSU. Of course, a lot of LSU defensive players really become great in the NFL, but I mean, he's just exciting. Like he kind of reminds you of like a Brian Burns from the Carolina Panthers, kind of an undersized guy, but does a lot with his length. And you look at him, and they're gonna play him up in a 2-point stance, which is really perfect for him because I don't know about putting him down in a 3-point stance, getting his hand in the dirt, just because this isn't a guy that's necessarily gonna win with power really all that often. But I see the Jaguars really using him to bend the edge a lot. I see them using a lot of stunt moves with this guy, and even like you said, kind of dropping into shallow zones. And this guy could potentially, him and Josh Allen, like really change the identity of our defense. And I'm excited to see the way Todd Wash uses him. I just think that especially with the state of the Jaguars, defensive end room with obviously Campbell being traded away and Yannick Ngakoue, nothing's happened with him, but he's pretty much refusing to play this year. So, we'll see how that plays out. But, when it comes to the draft, like you have to draft as if you're not going to have Yannick Ngakoue. And, I think this is a good move just because you need defensive you need defensive ends in this league. And, I think we got a good one with Chaisson. Of course, he's a high character guy. I saw an Instagram live between him and Josh Allen, earlier this week, and it's exciting. Go ahead and seeing these guys gel, and I'm excited to kind of see how much this guy really transforms the defense.
Yeah, I am too. And he does have a fair amount of power, even though he's only about 255 pounds. And like you said, I think with him and Josh Allen coming off the edge, you could really see a dramatic improvement. And gosh, Yannick Ngakoue doesn't really look like he has a lot of options right now when it comes to getting out of Jacksonville this year.
Yeah, with Yannick
I still
Ngakoue,
have
like
a hard time seeing him sit out a full season. So if you saw Yannick Ngakoue, Josh Allen, and K'Lavon Chaisson all on the same team, I mean, that is a terror coming off the edge.
Yeah, I mean, I would absolutely love that. I know I saw someone on Twitter come out with a graphic of Josh Allen, Chaisson, and Yannick Ngakoue, and I hadn't really thought of those three being together just because we've kind of written off Yannick Ngakoue, but I mean that would be just a really cool thing. But I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it would almost be a pride shot to Yannick Ngakoue just because this guy has just thrown so many bullets at the Jaguars, and he would almost Like, I feel like him looking at himself, he would almost feel like a clown if he were to go back and, play for the Jaguars. But obviously, he was playing on a third round pick deal, and, he's set to make about $19 million just to play 1 year. The Jaguars have all the leverage because, with the way the Jaguars roster is right now, I don't think we're in a big time win now mode in like 2020. So it's like, and I think it could be a situation where, we just get picks in 2021. Maybe, a team like the Saints, or like a team that's really in a playoff push, they feel like they might need like a defensive end to come in and play. And at the trade deadline, the Jaguars could deal in for a team that's in desperation. They could just flip a first round pick, kind of like how the Rams got desperate and trade us 2 first round picks for, Jalen Ramsey. I think during that time, teams can, get into that almost desperation mode. And, I think that he will eventually get flipped, but almost these 2021 draft picks are, I think, almost as useful as the 2020 draft picks, just since we already had so many.
I feel you. I kind of disagree, just because, not about the draft picks, but about a team potentially trading for Yannick, because he just values himself so highly. And I think that's been the biggest trade block in terms of not getting him out of Jacksonville, is what he's going to be demanding salary wise. And Jalen Ramsey, when he got traded, he wasn't having those contractual issues. He wasn't saying, I'm not going to play unless you pay me, things like that. So it complicates the situation, and further compounding it is he values himself as a top 5, maybe number 1 defensive end in the league. Whereas I don't think any teams around the league are really thinking that he's quite on that level. And so, yeah, it'll just be tough to see him go anywhere. I think his best route to getting paid what he wants to get paid is to play for the Jaguars in 2020, have a fantastic season, and then, the Jaguars can franchise tag him again and end up trading him.
So you think that he wouldn't play 1 year for another team under the franchise tag, or do you think that he's only in a mode of, like, I'm only going to accept a trade to a team if they already have a deal in place?
Yeah, based on what I've been hearing, it seems like teams are unwilling to pull the trigger for what the Jaguars are going to want from him or for him, knowing that they have to re-sign him. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, I got you there.
Basically, if a team were to trade for him and they don't have the cap space, or they don't have the urgency to sign him to a long-term deal where he's like the highest paid defensive end in football, they know that it's just going to be a rental.
Yeah.
And why would a team do that?
Then, like, what did the Seahawks trade for Clowney? Was that a first round pick?
No, I think they only gave up a 3rd round pick. So
yeah, I think they gave him like a 3rd round pick and some players,
right?
Trade
him for a 3rd round pick.
Yeah, I think they traded him for like a 3rd round pick and some players or something like that. So yeah, I mean, usually when these teams, like, like when Frank Clark got traded, he got traded, and then like that day a new deal was announced. So yeah, I mean, if you're gonna leverage a 1st round pick, you're gonna have to make that guy your future. So yeah, I mean, and you wonder how much all this Twitter stuff Yannick Ngakoue has done, like how much that has hurt, his stock out there.
Yeah, I would say it definitely hasn't helped. And I think, kind of coming back down to earth for him and accepting the franchise tag, that would go a long way as well towards teams, other teams around the league potentially kind of seeing that he can be amenable and kind of swallow his pride a bit.
Yeah. So I want to quickly give some like plugs real quick. You guys can follow me on Twitter at UCF_Jaguar, Twitter and Instagram. You guys can follow Jordan DeLugo on Twitter. His links are down below at Jordan DeLugo. He's also runs all the Generation Jaguar social media links, whether it be on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. All those links are down below. You can purchase merchandise, this UCF Jaguar shirt. I know a lot of people like it. A lot of people like the comfort. And last week I introduced memberships I'm up to 23 different memberships, so if you guys are interested in, some member-only content and much, much more, but many things come with each different perk that you may sign up for. So, if that's something that you guys are interested, no pressure at all, but, you can also, join the channel membership in the links down below. So we'll go ahead and get at the next pick, the second round pick. Number 42 overall, the Jaguars drafted wide receiver Laviska Shenault in the second round out of Colorado. Jordan, what did you think of this pick?
So I think it's a great pick. I think the only risk you run here is the injuries, and none of his past injuries are injuries that I'm worried about, like carrying with him throughout his career. The problem is he plays such a physical brand of football. He puts himself in harm's way a lot. I think that these nagging injuries could be a thing that kind of follow him throughout his career. But having said that, I mean, outside of the injuries, he can do it all on the football field as a wide receiver. Line up out wide, line up in the slot, line up at H-back, line up at wildcat quarterback, line up at running back. I mean, he literally can do it all. He's not the tallest receiver. He's 6'1", 6'2", but very athletic, very strong hands, good body control, physicality. He's like 220 pounds, 225 pounds. So he's a guy that when I was evaluating him, I had him in the 60s in terms of on my big board. Part of that was due to injury. The other part of that was due to kind of projecting him as a true number one wide receiver. The good thing about the Jaguars and the good thing for Laviska Shenault about landing in Jacksonville is he doesn't have to be the true number one receiver. He literally can just move around on offense. You have DJ Chark as your number one. You have other guys that can play slot. You have other guys that can play outside. So I think Chenault's really in a perfect situation. And landing with Jay Gruden as well, I think, will really help him. And also landing with Keenan McCardell as the wide receiver coach. When you take a guy that's as talented and physically gifted as Laviska Shenault, and you get him paired up with Keenan McCardell as the wide receiver coach, I think that could be a match made in heaven.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I would almost have been tempted to stay away from him just because, I don't want it to be another Marquise league where you're constantly monitoring the injury report and, a guy that deals with this injury, then he recovers and kind of deals with that injury. Hopefully that doesn't follow him, but I mean, outside the injury, man, this guy is definitely a competitor, man. I mean, this guy gets tons of yards after contact. This guy really dominated the level that he played at, and I'm excited to see what he can do, man. I mean, he seems like a very excited guy, very self-motivated. Obviously, he keeps his dreadlocks because of, in memory to his dad, who he literally saw die in front of him. He got, run over by a truck, and, I can't imagine that kind of traumatic experience. And, he's another high-character kind of guy. He's pretty quiet until I guess people get to know him, and then he opens up a little bit. But I mean, this guy can do a lot. I mean, he's a different type of wide receiver than DJ Chark. So this guy is definitely a very high end possession type of receiver. So I mean, hopefully he can bring some physicality to that wide receiver room. Hopefully he can kind of draw safeties away from DJ Chark as DJ Chark kind of keeps on working that sideline. And with Laviska Shenault, it's definitely a high risk, but also high reward type of thing. I just hope, I just pray that he can kind of stay away from these injuries.
Yeah, and the one thing that's different about what he's dealt with versus Marquise Lee is Marquise Lee was always that soft tissue stuff, the ACLs, the knee, and that's the type of stuff that you really worry about as compared to Shenault, who there is some risk, obviously, like we've talked about, but I don't think it's that long-term injury risk that you're worried about. It's just kind of those nagging things where he might be out a couple weeks. He might miss a few games every season just from these little injuries.
Yeah, that's true. And honestly, the last thing you ever want to hear from a player is that, they kind of tweak their hamstring, just because those things, I mean, if you get a hamstring tweak early on in the season, I mean, those kind of things typically, those typically follow them up all year round. They may not, they may be able to play a bunch of consecutive games, but it's always there. And so yeah, I mean, it's gonna be exciting to see what he can do. Obviously, some of his highlight film was pretty cool. So we'll move on to the next pick. Round number 3, pick number 73 overall. We got a big defensive tackle, nose guard, DaVon Hamilton out of Ohio State. What are some of your thoughts with this pick?
So this was actually, you know, watching the draft, I was so excited the Jaguars took DaVon Hamilton. He was like my 30th ranked player, my third ranked defensive tackle behind Derek Brown and Javon Kinlaw. Javon Kinlaw was actually my number 1 defensive tackle. But yeah, Hamilton is, big nose tackle type guy. He's going to eat up space. He's going to do that really well. He's very strong. He had the most bench reps at the combine out of any player this year, 33 bench press reps. And he ran pretty well, which he showed on tape. He can chase down plays. And he's just really quick off the line, uses his hands well, uses his strength well, and really slips past interior offensive linemen pretty regularly. And he was actually, in terms of pressure percentage, he was a more effective pass rusher than Derek Brown was in 2019. Now, the one thing you look at with Hamilton is it was pretty much 1 year of big time production. But if you go back to his 2018 tape, when he was on the field, he still looked really good. He was still really effective. It was just one of those things where Ohio State has had such depth on their D line. It took him a while to crack the starting lineup, but he's a hardworking guy, very talented, kind of has worked himself into being the player that he is now. He was barely a 3-star recruit coming out. So he's really improved himself as a player throughout his days at Ohio State. And he's a guy I'm really excited to see in Jacksonville. And I don't know if he'll start from day one just because you got Al Woods there, who the Jaguars picked up in free agency. But I think he's a guy that will at least be in the rotation from the get-go. And probably moving into 2021 will take over as a full-time starter.
Yeah, I mean, really, these defensive tackles. I mean, if you're on the roster and you're active, you're going to be getting in the game just because they cycle those guys out a lot. Obviously, the position needed to be addressed after last year. Just we were pretty abysmal against the run, and we had we allowed over 200 yards, rushing to Christian McCaffrey. We allowed 2 different 100-yard rushers when we played against the Colts, and it wasn't a good spot that we were at. So I mean, every year we're going to be drafting defensive tackles somewhere in the top 5 rounds, and this is a guy, he was productive for Ohio State. So I mean, hopefully he can turn into something pretty good for the Jaguars. So next we'll move on to round 4. We had 3 different picks in the 4th round, and we started it off with getting offensive tackle Ben Bartch. He was a small school guy out of St. John. So what are some of your thoughts about Ben?
Obviously a Division III guy. So when you look at how he dominated against his competition, you kind of have to take that for what it is. Yes, you want to see him dominate that level of competition, but does it tell you that he's going to be able to dominate or play very well against better competition? And the answer is you don't know. But then he gets invited to the Senior Bowl, gets out there. He's taking reps in practice against guys like Jabari Zuniga, Terrell Lewis, several other guys that ended up getting drafted on day 2 and 3. And he's winning most of those reps, playing very well in practice, showing good athleticism, good feet. His pass sets were impressive in the practices. And he has versatility. The Jaguars think he's going to end up playing guard to start his career, and then they'll work him at tackle as well. Of course, he played left tackle at St. John. He's a guy that obviously is a very hard worker. They don't have a premier strength and conditioning program in Division III at St. John. He was able to gain almost 90 pounds throughout college to be able to play tackle, even at that level. And Seems like a really interesting kid. Obviously, he had the whole smoothie phenomenon going on that helped him gain the 90 pounds. And I think he's a player that, despite playing against lesser competition in college, based on what you saw at the Senior Bowl and the athletic traits and just his natural ability, he's a guy that projects well, and he should be a starter for the Jaguars, if not at some point in 2020, definitely moving into 2021.
So do you think 2 years from now, do you think he's going to be our starting left tackle, or do you think he's going to be one of the starting guards, whether replacing Andrew Norwell or playing right guard at AJ Can's spot?
So it just all depends on Cam Robinson when you talk about left tackle. How does he play this year? If he plays well, I think the Jaguars, you know, end up needing to re-sign him because this is his final year of his rookie deal that he's going into. And if he doesn't play well, then maybe you're looking at Bartch playing out there at left tackle. But if Robinson plays decent, they keep him around. If he doesn't play decent, they might end up drafting a left tackle in the first round and still keeping Bartch on the interior. I think Andrew Norwell's last year in Jacksonville will be 2020 probably. They have an out after that. So I could see him playing left guard. I think he's more natural on the left side because that's where he's been playing. Mm-hmm. So I think left guard would be a better fit. But, AJ Can or Will Richardson, whoever's ended up starting over at right guard, neither of those guys were overly impressive last year. So you could see him over there as well. It really just kind of depends on how these guys in front of him right now come in and play in training camp and preseason and then into the start of the regular season.
Yeah, it's really it's the most significant kind of upgrade the Jaguars have received on, it's the biggest investment, I should say, the Jaguars have made this offseason at offensive line. We didn't pay any starter money to anybody in free agency. And then, obviously this is the first offensive lineman we selected in this draft. And, he's actually the only offensive lineman we selected in this draft. We got some in undrafted free agency, which I'm going to cover later on. I just got to get a little more time to cover those guys. But, it's going to be intriguing to kind of see where we play him. I would imagine he's, with the kind of different injuries that happen on the offensive line, he will get, at least, some playing time, maybe even a few starts. So, we'll have to kind of track this guy's progress this year. Now, the second, fourth round pick the Jaguars had, this was number 137 overall. This is a pick that we acquired via the AJ Boye trade from Denver. We went out and got another cornerback. We got Josiah Scott out of Michigan State University. So Jordan, what are some of your thoughts on this cornerback?
So 5'9" tall, 29 3/8" arms. So he's obviously very diminutive for a cornerback. Not the type of length you're looking for when you're looking at a starting outside corner. But when you're looking at the nickel, he should fit in perfectly there. Very physical, despite being an undersized type of guy. And he's 185 pounds. So at 5'9", 185 pounds, that's not too skinny. He has some bulk to him for a guy that's as short as he is. And like I said, he plays very physical. He's excellent in coverage, fluid feet. He's got that 4.4 speed. He's very fast, very competitive. At Michigan State last year, he ended up allowing a quarterback rating of only 58.7, which in college is just ridiculous. 3 interceptions last year, a lot of passes defended. He's the type of guy that I think if he was a couple inches taller, probably would have been a first or second round pick based on his tape and his ability. But he should slot in as the Jaguars' backup nickel to start. You've got DJ Hayden at nickel right now, obviously, who's been very good for the Jaguars there. But Scott should be able to also play special teams. Like I said, he has the 4.4 speed. So having him out there on punt and kickoff coverage should really help the Jaguars. And DJ Hayden is a guy who has only played in 14 games over the last 2 years. So if you're talking about Josiah Scott being the number 2 nickel, he's probably going to get a lot of playing time. And if he does end up getting a lot of playing time, unfortunately for DJ Hayden, I don't think he will come back to that same starting role that he's accustomed to, because Scott, I think, is going to play very well when he does end up hitting the field. And then also Hayden is going into the last year of his contract. So this is another guy that at the latest I would expect him to probably enter the starting lineup 2021.
Yeah, I mean, this could be a very, very cheap nickel cornerback that we have. Once 2021 hits. 2021 we'll have a lot of money to spend in free agency, so we won't have to use some of that money and kind of tie it up with a nickel cornerback. And honestly, we're not going to have to pay much money to our cornerback, especially if we don't upgrade from Trey Herndon. We'll see what he kind of does this year, and we can really see if he's a true cornerback number two. Obviously the Jaguars invested a first round pick in CJ Henderson, so he's going to be able to, get his opportunity. So, he's got the perfect size for nickel cornerback. He'll probably contribute in special teams, kind of right away. So, it's one of 4 defensive backs the Jaguars drafted, in this draft. So, 3 picks later, the Jaguars went with a local boy. They went with Shaq Quarterman at pick number 140 overall. This was a pick that we acquired from Chicago for Nick Foles. Shaq Quarterman, a former Oakleaf guy, played college football at Miami. Jordan, what are some of your thoughts on Shaq Quarterman? And I also want to know what position, which linebacker spot do you project him to play for the Jaguars?
So when I was evaluating Quarterman, and this was before the combine, I wasn't too high on him just because I didn't think the athletic traits were really there, but he did decent in terms of running the 40, ran in the 4.7. So it's not like he's as slow as I thought he was going to run. So that's good. You look at his tape, he's a tackle machine. He's clearly a vocal leader for the Hurricanes down there. And he's a guy that loves Jacksonville. He said, in high school, it was always his dream to play for the Jaguars. So I think he's a guy that'll definitely be a culture guy. I think he's a very good tackler, very instinctual, should be able to serve him well at the NFL level. I think because the Jaguars are going to be running more 3-4 in base, you could potentially see him on the field with Joe Schobert in the middle, both of them playing inside linebacker at times, if the Jaguars do something to where perhaps you've got Quarterman and Schobert on the field in the middle, Jack on one outside, and then one of the pass rushers at Sam on the other side, and then one of the other edge rushers lined up down on the line of scrimmage. It'll be interesting to see how the Jaguars end up implementing more of the 3-4 that they've talked about. I don't know exactly how it's going to be run, if it's going to be both of the edge rushers are basically going to be linebackers now. We'll see how that all works out. But I do see Quarterman as an inside linebacker. I think he could end up getting some playing time as a rookie, but probably his best role would be to be a special teams guy as a rookie, backup inside linebacker behind Joe Schobert, and maybe after a few years of Schobert playing at inside linebacker, perhaps that would be Quarterman's time to then see if he can prove himself as a starter.
Yeah, one thing to note, he does have the number 50 number now, so he has taken over Telvin Smith's number for now. So, he's he'll definitely be on the roster this year. I'm really hoping the best for him because obviously you always cheer for your local guys, and he just seems like such a high character, enthusiastic guy. So, with the Jaguars switching to a 3-4 defense, a lot of research will need to be done when it comes to, what we're going to do with the linebackers. Obviously, when you draft players in the first round, you want to kind of build your team around those guys. And, Josh Allen always projected as a better 3-4, edge outside linebacker type of player. Then you get Chaisson at number 20, and, he definitely projects better in a 2-point stance. So it's something to definitely monitor. But we'll move on to the 5th round now.
I did have one thing I wanted to get in there.
Yeah, let's hear it.
Talking about the switch to the 3-4, we're all kind of clamoring to see what that's going to look like, how the Jaguars are going to play that. But one thing to keep in mind is they're talking about doing that in base. I don't think you're going to be seeing that in nickel very much. And the Jaguars are in nickel 75% of the time. So we need to kind of reel it back in terms of talking about the Jaguars completely changing their defense. I don't think it's going to be a 100% switch to 3-4, especially not in the nickel. So you're going to still see the traditional weak side linebacker and Sam linebacker and things like that when they're in the nickel. Just something to keep in mind as everybody's so excited about the 3-4.
So do you think Shaq Quarterman might play any bit of strong side linebacker inside of base downs?
I guess he could. I just don't see why you would.
Yeah.
Just because, like, you could have Chaisson over there or Leon Jacobs. Leon Jacobs has been very effective as a Sam linebacker for the Jaguars. I think you'd train Quarterman to be your middle linebacker of the future. And I think he could end up being a good team leader and a good inside linebacker a couple years down the road.
So what do you think? What do you think the Jaguars' third down package will look like in, third and long situations on a defensive line? Like, who do you see? Who do you see at those spots?
So I would say obviously you're going to want Allen and Chaisson coming off the edge, right? You're going to want Schobert in at middle linebacker, Jack at weak side linebacker. Taven Bryan's got to be in there, the three technique. He's your best pass rusher from a defensive tackle standpoint. And then I think you'll be looking at either having Rodney Gunter next to him or potentially DaVon Hamilton. But yeah, Gunter provides some pass rush. He's not like a magnificent pass rusher, but he can get the job done. And I think Hamilton can too. So
Yeah.
I think that's kind of what you'd be looking at there.
Yeah, I hear you on that. So we'll move on to the fifth round now. In the front at pick number 157, this was a pick that we acquired from the Ravens for Calais Campbell.
Did I lose you there?
Yeah, we didn't actually have a fifth round. We didn't have a true fifth round pick from us. I forget what we traded. No, we traded away last year. I think when we moved up to get maybe when we moved up to get Juwan Taylor. I don't know, but pick 157 we received from the Ravens for Calais Campbell, and we wound up drafting strong safety out of Auburn, Daniel Thomas. I didn't know much about Daniel Thomas coming out, so what are some thoughts? What are some thoughts about you have about this pick?
He plays really well going downhill, both as a run defender and in pass coverage. He's not a guy that's going to be a really good free safety, trying to cover deep down the field. That's not going to be his forte. So for me, it's kind of like you have Ronnie Harrison that does that. You have Jared Wilson that does that. Now you add Thomas to the mix. It's like the Jaguars want hybrid safeties instead of a guy who's just a free safety or just a strong safety, which I think hurts them down the field in coverage. But I do like Thomas in terms of being a strong safety, in terms of being very instinctual, made a lot of big plays at Auburn, both in the run game and pass game. He's a big hitter. He's athletic for a strong safety, runs a 4.5 40, very strong, very instinctive. I think he's a guy that's a good pick there. I just think he adds more of what you already have at the safety position for the Jaguars. So I wasn't too high on the pick, not because I don't like him as a player, but because I don't see how that benefits the Jaguars outside of special teams in the short term.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. I would have rather tried to find a safety that had a little bit more range when it comes to coverage. I mean, obviously Jared Wilson's going to be in there starting for us this year. I guess that's kind of a 2020 Band-Aid for us before, we probably invest in kind of upgrading at that next year. But, you wonder what the coaches may think about Ronnie Harrison. This is a guy that has been pretty inconsistent at the position. It seems like every game this guy was like getting hurt, then he would like come back later in the game. But he's been, I know, everyone loved him back when, we had Barry Church on the team and stuff like that. But he's just, he's been just a story of kind of inconsistency for the Jaguars. So you wonder if there's any kind of, if there's any kind of low-key competition going on where the coaches, are kind of looking at maybe this could be a guy that eventually replaces Ronnie Harrison. You never know with that, but
Yeah. I think if you're talking about him getting on the field in 2020, as a defender. Potentially, he could compete with Jared Wilson at free safety because Wilson isn't providing anything extra in coverage that I don't think Thomas could provide. But I do agree with you on the Ronnie Harrison front. I think this is a make or break year for him. He needs to be more consistent. And so if Harrison doesn't prove to be more consistent, you could see maybe Thomas stepping into the starting lineup at some point at strong safety, perhaps going into 2021, and then maybe the Jaguars investing in the free safety position either next year in free agency when they have a lot of money or in the draft.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be fascinating to see what we do. Obviously, we have, 12 rookie draft picks, so, and not even including the undrafted free agents. So, it'll be really fascinating to kind of see where these guys eventually go and where they play because, there's really a lot of speculation on what could happen. And, speculation could continue on into the season, into training camp, as OTAs and stuff are all virtual. So, it's just I don't know what that's going to look like with the OTAs. So we just have to kind of keep monitoring that. So we'll move on to the next pick in the fifth round. This was a 165th pick. This pick belonged to the Rams. It was not through Jalen Ramsey. It was actually through Dante Fowler Jr. We had this pick. So it's pick number 165. This was a big wide receiver, Colin Johnson, out of Texas. Jordan, what are some of your thoughts about this prospect?
So kind of similar to Shenault in terms of Shenault couldn't come out last year because he was only a sophomore. But had he been able to, he probably would have been a first round pick. Colin Johnson is a guy too that had he come out after the 2018 college football season, I think he would have been drafted a lot higher, probably looking at like a day two type guy. Doesn't have blazing speed, but very physical, can really go up above the rim, make a lot of nice contested catches. 6'6" tall, got a nice vert, very physical, like I said, and he should be a guy that will make the roster. And maybe Chris Conley will be his biggest impediment to getting on the field in year one. But I think in the red zone, he should definitely be a type of guy that the Jaguars try to get on the field as early as year one and then probably develop him into a possession type receiver in between the 20s and then hopefully a touchdown maker type of guy in the red zone. The Jaguars have really struggled in the red zone, and getting a guy like that could go above the rim and catch a lot of contested balls in the red zone could really help.
Yeah, and it's these big receivers. They always intrigue me just because they got all that size, and like you said, the Jaguars were horrible in the red zone last year. They were horrible early in the year. They made that a focus in practice, and they never got better at it. They just continued to be bad. You look at what kind of we did this year. We're getting James O'Shaughnessy back from injury. We brought in Tyler Eifert. Josh Oliver will hopefully, be able to produce something next year. Josh Oliver is a third-round tight end that we drafted in the 2019 draft. You bring in like Colin Johnson. So, hopefully, we can do better in the red zone next year. We definitely added, several guys that can, catch the ball with some height. And, you never know with this guy. He might be able to put on some weight and maybe even be, an eventual tight end. A lot of tight ends in the NFL, in college, they were playing defensive end or offensive line before they switched over to tight end. So, maybe this is a guy that might be able to bulk up and play that position. We'll just have to see, man. He'll be something fun to work with. So we'll go later, sixth round, the 189th overall pick. The Jaguars drafted Jake Luton. He was a quarterback out of Oregon State. They passed up on Jake Fromm to get this guy. A lot of people kind of raise their eyebrows at that. It's I think the third year in a row we drafted a quarterback in the sixth round. We got Tanner Lee in 2018. That flopped. We got Gardner Minshew in 2019. Obviously, that did pretty well. So, we throw another, low risk type of pick at another quarterback. So, Jordan, what are some of your thoughts about, this big old quarterback?
I never have a problem with trying to take a quarterback late. I think it's always just it's nice to keep young quarterbacks coming in. And like what happened with Minshew, and even to a lesser extent, Brandon Allen, 4 or 5 years ago, you can get a guy that can at least become a good backup, or, with Minshew, he could be this franchise's starting quarterback for years to come. But specifically with Luton, he's a really tall guy. He's got a good arm, not a great arm, but a very good arm in terms of his arm strength. And then very, very good at taking care of the football. Only 3 interceptions in his final year at Oregon State to 28 touchdown passes. Surprisingly, he gets the ball batted at the line of scrimmage quite a bit. I think that has to do with his throwing motion. I think defenders are kind of able to get a read on when he's going to release the ball a little bit early, which is obviously something he's going to have to try to improve if he hopes to make an NFL roster. But I think there's traits there that you can work with, certainly. Like I said, the arm strength. I think he has some good pocket mobility. He's not the type of guy that's going to be running all over the field, but within the pocket and kind of scrambling around, keeps his eyes downfield. He has a good feel for the pocket. And I think he's a guy that, can compete for the final roster spot at quarterback currently. Now, if the Jaguars go out and get Andy Dalton, probably Jake Luton's looking at practice squad at best. So we'll see how that goes for him. But not a terrible pick. You've got 12 picks. Go try to take a stab at a quarterback and see what he can get you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think we should be getting quarterbacks in every draft just because you never know what you're going to get out of them. This is a guy that, he's very tall. I think he's like 6'6" or 6'7". I remember, when they drafted him, I was kind of watching him play a little bit, and, I noticed that, he had pretty good accuracy. He's got some good zips on the ball. He can kind of layer it, but one of the first things I noticed is his throwing motion. If you've been a Jaguar fan throughout the 2010s, when you see the kind of whiny throwing motion, it kind of reminds you of a quarterback that wore number 5. So, always that's a little bit of a concern, but, it'll be interesting. I mean, he kind of towers over Minshew. We'll kind of see. I mean, hope competing with Josh Dobbs. Like you said, if Andy Dalton comes in, he's probably looking at practice squad, but, never a bad thing to go out and get a quarterback. So if you guys are just joining now, man, I've got a bunch of links down below. I'm here with Jordan DeLugo. He is a writer. He does all kinds of graphics and stuff like that for Generation Jaguar. You can follow him on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo, and also through Twitter, Instagram at Generation Jag. All of those links are down below. You can also follow myself on Twitter and Instagram at UCF_Jaguar. You can also purchase a comfortable UCF Jaguar shirt, as well as become a member of the channel. We are 23 strong. You guys get all kinds of different member-only perks, some like member-only videos. You guys get, cool emojis that people have been throwing down, down below. So appreciate everybody for kind of being in here today as we kind of round out the end of this draft. Later on, we go to round 6, pick number 206 overall, with tight end Tyler Davis. He was tight end for Georgia Tech, and this is a pick that we actually acquired from Seattle. In 2019, we traded our 7th round pick for Seahawks 2020 6th round pick, so this is what we kind of got. Didn't really have much production, when it comes to receiving the ball at Georgia Tech. A lot of that probably has to do with just the Georgia Tech offense. They didn't throw the ball too much. So Jordan, what did you think about this selection?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I didn't know too much about him before the draft, but he was Georgia Tech's first tight end that they rostered in like a decade and a half. Kind of crazy. He's a transfer from UConn, and his final season at UConn, he actually did catch 6 touchdown passes, so he kind of proved to be a red zone threat there. But he's a traits type of guy. He's big. I believe he's 6'6" as well, 250 pounds, and ran like a 4.6 or 4.7 40 at his pro day. So he's a guy that's another traits guy, developmental guy. I think he's also a culture guy. He was voted team captain at Georgia Tech, even though he only played there for one season. So he's a guy that you take a shot on some traits and some things you've seen on tape, and the fact that he's obviously a leadership type guy. And if he can come in and be the Jaguars' fourth tight end, kind of an insurance policy early on, compete with Charles Jones for that fourth tight end spot, I think that's a win. When you've got Tyler Eifert slotted in as your starting tight end right now, he's been injured a lot throughout his career, although he was fully healthy in 2019. Then you've got James O'Shaughnessy coming off an ACL. You've got Josh Oliver, who spent most of his rookie year battling through injuries. So you've got a lot of injury-prone guys there. Getting more depth at that position and getting a guy who's kind of an under-the-radar guy but has those traits you're looking for doesn't hurt, especially, once you're getting into the 200s.
Yeah, and a lot of times, like tight ends, kind of like I was saying earlier, like a lot of these guys are kind of projects. Like, a lot of the greatest tight ends in NFL history have been guys drafted in the later rounds to guys that have been undrafted. So, something caught the Jaguars' eye with this guy. I think Dave Caldwell, wants to use him a lot in the, run blocking game. So hopefully he doesn't turn into like a Ben Koyak. But, when you throw a 6th-round pick at a guy, I mean, there's really you're not really investing a lot, but but the Jaguars, I guess they see something in Tyler Davis, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Now, the last pick the Jaguars had, round 7, they drafted their 4th cornerback with Chris Claybrooks out of Memphis. So, this is just primarily special teams guy. They were looking at him to maybe be like the kick return, punt returner. So, Jordan, what are some of your thoughts about this cornerback?
I mean, he says he ran a 4.25 in training this offseason. So you get a guy that's that fast, that has experience returning the ball. The Jaguars have had a lot of troubles, especially last season, with their kick return job. Michael Walker really dropped the ball metaphorically and literally quite a bit for the Jaguars last year as a kick returner. So you get a guy who can come in and potentially lock down the kick return job. I think if they could do that and get a guy with that type of explosiveness on the field, 4.25 type 40 speed, that could really change the game for the Jaguars. They haven't really had an asset as a kick returner in a little while. So Joe DeCamillis loves his special teams guys. I'm sure he's excited to get Claybrooks in there, and I'd be excited too if I was the Jaguars coaching staff getting a guy with that much speed that has kick return ability.
Yeah, and really the kick return and punt return, it's really never been a position that I ever remember the Jaguars being really solidified at. I mean, we've always got flashes of it. Like, we got kind of flashes with Ace Sanders, and we got kind of flashes with Jadon Mickens, but, none of those guys ever really did it consistently. I mean, hopefully this is a guy for the next 4 years we can go in and we can pencil him in to be our starting kick return punt returner. But, obviously with that kind of speed, like with these late picks, I mean, you're either getting, maybe a punter or a kicker that you really want to get, that you don't want to kind of have to fight over in, undrafted free agency, or you want to get, maybe you get some speed. I mean, I remember a couple years ago, they've got, what was that guy's name? They got a really fast defensive back. I can't think of his name right now, but he was another guy. I think it was in like the 4.2s that they kind of threw a 7th-round pick at. That they thought maybe this guy could be something. So
man, I know who you're talking about. I can't remember his name either now for some reason.
Yeah, he was a cornerback. I forget. I think he was on the roster for like 1 year. I'm sure someone in the live chat will help me out with it. But yeah, I mean, he was kind of another speedy guy. So we kind of went over all the draft picks. So I guess to end this out, we can kind of answer some questions. So if you guys have any questions, kind of throw them at us. And I saw one person mention a lot of discussion is that the Jaguars are tanking for Trevor Lawrence. I mean, What are your thoughts on the whole Jaguars tanking 2020 theory?
I think it's hilarious. You know, Doug Marrone and Dave Caldwell aren't going to have their jobs if the Jaguars tank this year.
Yeah.
I don't care what anybody says. They cannot regress in 2020 and keep their jobs. That's just not what's going to keep them around. And just because they traded veterans does not mean they're tanking. I believe they traded those veterans to create a more beneficial salary cap situation and also to get young, hungry players that fit the culture that they want to build, which is a team first culture. Obviously, Calais Campbell fit into that perfectly, but they just couldn't keep him on board with that salary. They couldn't pay that salary for 6 sacks and a good run defender. So, no, I don't think they're tanking. And even if they were trying to tank, I just don't think that they're going to end up being one of the worst teams in the NFL. Gardner Minshew is not going to win you 2 or 3 games. I mean, he's just not going to. Even if he has a terrible season, he's going to end up winning 4 or 5 games at least if he starts all the games. Then you look at Andy Dalton probably coming in. I just don't see any way this team's that bad.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I remember in 2013, like our roster was horrible. We really didn't have anybody. I mean, like right now on the roster, we have a guy that had 1,600 all-purpose yards in Leonard Fournette. We have a 1,000-yard receiver in DJ Chark. We have a double-digit sack guy in Josh Allen, and that's not even including all the guys that we drafted and some of the veterans that we had. And we didn't even get the first overall pick that year. And the Jaguars at quarterback, Gardner Minshew, he's going to get us at least 5 or 6 wins. I mean, the team was a mess last year, and he was still 6-6 as a starting quarterback. And I think it's possible to tank and be bad, but I don't think it's I don't think it's possible to actually tank and try to get the number 1 overall pick. I just don't. I'm with you on that. I just a lot of people are talking about tanking for Trevor, and the CBS mock drafts will have are penciling the Jaguars at number 1 overall next year. I'm not someone who necessarily thinks that the Jaguars will make the playoffs this year in 2020, but I don't think we'll end up with the number 1 overall spot. So we had a question from Predator. He says, do you guys like Miles Jack? Me personally, I think it's a make or break year for Miles Jack. Obviously they moved him all around the defense when it comes to the linebacker position. They've had him play strong side linebacker, moved him to middle linebacker. Didn't really work out, but I think he's in his most natural spot now at weak side linebacker. He can just kind of fly around the field. So what are your thoughts about Miles Jack in 2020?
The question was, do we like Miles Jack?
Yeah, just do you like Miles Jack?
The answer is definitely yes. For me, I believe it is a make or break year for him, but that has a negative connotation. He hasn't played as well as at middle linebacker as the Jaguars hoped that he would. That's really not his fault. He never played middle linebacker before. He played weak side linebacker in college. He came to Jacksonville, played strong side linebacker. And then in 2017, which was his best season by far, he played strong side and base and then played in the middle and the nickel. And he had a fantastic year that year. He's not the guy that should be getting everybody lined up. He's not the guy that should be having to worry about everyone else. I also think last year he struggled because he was trying to overcome some of the mistakes that guys like Quincy Williams were making. So I think getting him at weak side is going to be huge for him. I would not be surprised if he's has an all-pro caliber season. I'm not saying he will be all-pro, but I think at weak side linebacker, there's no reason he shouldn't be able to be a Pro Bowler or have a Pro Bowl type season. And the thing about it with him is he's so naturally gifted when he just has one side of the field to cover. Middle linebackers have to worry about everyone else on the field. They have to worry about the right side of the field, the left side of the field, what's directly in front of them. At weak side, he's just got to worry about what's in front of him on one side of the field. He's going to really get after it at weak side linebacker, in my opinion.
Yeah. And then Augustin has a question. What do you guys think of Taven Bryan? And do you believe he will be a force for us since most of the D-line is gone? I mean, me personally, like when you look at Taven Bryan, I mean, he just for me, like I think of him a little bit more highly than a lot of other Jaguar fans do. Obviously, you kind of pin the whole first round pick on him, and obviously sometimes he can look just flat out stupid on the field. He kind of keeps his mouth wide open. I don't know. Sometimes he can look strange, but I mean, he has a lot of power. I mean, when you look at him and when he's in third down packages, I mean, he can just push the offensive guard back, and if he gets lower than the guy and he gets his hands on the first, he just gets him back. But his whole problem is that he doesn't shed blocks very well. Like he doesn't do a very good job of recognizing where the ball is and kind of slinging the guy off him to get to where the ball is. So I just think that he's continuing to work on his football IQ, continuing to kind of get a feel for really the game of football. Was he worth that number 29 overall pick? I mean, probably not, but I just don't think that he is a total like useless player. What are your thoughts on that, Jordan?
So I agree. He's kind of an oddball. Can't really tell what's going on upstairs sometimes. Mm-hmm. But if you go back and watch the last quarter of last season, last 4 games or so, I just challenge you to go back and watch him during those games. He was wreaking havoc in the backfield. I mean, it wasn't showing up on the stat sheet every weekend because he wasn't always making the tackle in the backfield or always making the sack in the backfield. But he was blowing plays up, and the rest of the guys around him were feasting because he was just wrecking plays. I mean, interior offensive linemen, when Taven Bryan knows what he's supposed to be doing and is able to execute and process quickly, they don't have a chance against him. With his physicality, strength-wise and speed-wise, he really can be a wrecking ball. I'm looking for him to put it all together this year. I hope that adding 3-4 principles or more 3-4 principles doesn't kind of like take him out of whack and confuse him, because the Jaguars need to just let him penetrate. Let him try to get into the backfield and let everybody else clean up around him. And if they do that, and if he continues to progress even a little bit from what he was doing at the end of last year, I think you'll see a season from him where everybody's kind of like, oh, this is why the Jaguars took him 29 overall. Yeah. This is what they saw in him. Obviously, you're never going to outlive or outrun the fact that you were drafted in front of Lamar Jackson by a team that needed quarterback help. So that's always going to hang over his career no matter what. And I can't really blame fans for that, but I do think he's going to have a productive 2020 season.
Yeah, so we'll end it with this question from Cody. He says, do you think we can end the season 500 or higher? I can go first. I think that I think the Jaguars have a chance to finish 500 or above. It's all about what kind of production we get out of this rookie class. It's all about staying healthy. But really, the biggest thing is just how Gardner Minshew plays this year. I mean, he can elevate this team to where we could potentially be a playoff team. But or if he doesn't do well, if his fumbling problem continues, if he just doesn't take the big step you want from a quarterback from year 1 to year 2, then we could be another double-digit loss season. It's just, I worry because I don't think we did a lot to necessarily help Gardner Minshew out this year, especially around the offensive line. The offensive line wasn't great last year, and we didn't do a whole lot to really improve that. We didn't spend a bunch of money in free agency. Obviously, we only drafted one offensive lineman, and it wasn't until the 4th round. So, but we did get some receiver help in there. We got some more tight ends in the mix. So, there's a new system coming in with Jay Gruden. But I mean, I really think that Gardner Minshew is the real X factor for the Jaguars in 2020. What are some of your thoughts, Jordan?
I'd agree with you that Gardner Minshew is the X factor. I'd say, is it possible that the Jaguars could win 8 games or more? Sure. I mean, if Gardner Minshew starts lighting the world on fire, has his big-time connection with DJ Chark, and has a good connection with Laviska Shenault, and then Dede Westbrook, Chris Conley, Colin Johnson, Keelan Cole, if he's still around, Leonard Fournette, if those guys are playing well around him, they're a team that can compete at a very high level. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. How long does it take the defense to start gelling with so many young pieces? With Joe Schobert, a new middle linebacker, with Miles Jack moving outside, Kayvon Chaisson, how quickly does he turn it on? CJ Henderson, is he locking guys down from the get-go? I think teams like Jacksonville have such a high variance of what this season could end up looking at because there's so many parts that you just don't know because of youth, because of new players, and like you said, because of Gardner Minshew, we just don't know what we're going to get. You're encouraged by what you saw as a rookie, but was that lightning in a bottle? Is he going to be able to continue to develop? The answers are not clear at this point. But I could see the Jaguars going 8-8. I could see them eclipsing that. I could also see them winning 4 or 5 games. My prediction currently is 6-10. Obviously, that can change between now and the start of the season, whenever that may be. But yeah, the Jaguars could win 8 games. I wouldn't bank on it right now, though.
Yeah, and that's about my prediction. I think the Jaguars will be about 5-11, 6-10. I think that this year is all about learning what we got out of our rookie class. I think it's all about learning what we have out of Gardner Minshew, and then next year the cap looks pretty favorable. You can kind of go out and spend some money in whatever positions you might feel the need to. And we got 2 more first round picks in 2021. We've got some more draft capital coming that way. You never know, what's going to happen if we can trade Ngakoue, maybe get at least like a second round pick next year. But, you never know what's going to happen. I think 2021 will be the year like we really make the run. But, we'll go ahead and end this here, man. I'll give some shout out to Augustin. Shout out to 4 on 4 off, Monet, Razel Sin, January Man, Dwayne the Rim, Youngin Go Gadget. Thank you guys all for joining, man. We got all of our links down below. You can follow Jordan DeLugo on Twitter at Jordan DeLugo, and also follow Generation Jaguar on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can join the Jaguars Facebook page. You can follow me at UCF_Jaguar. Purchase merchandise and also potentially become a member of the channel if you guys can. And also drop a like on the channel before you guys leave. This whole entire 1 hour and 10 minute live stream will be archived, so you guys can catch the full replay within the hour once YouTube kind of processes it and uploads it. And I wanted to give a big shout out to Jordan for joining the stream today.
Yeah, appreciate you having me on. I had a great time. We should do this more frequently. This is the first time on the channel for me somehow. Yeah. But yeah, we should definitely do it more frequently. I had a great time talking football. I appreciate all of your followers, subscribers for coming and watching this video and hanging out with us. And I look forward to doing it again soon.
All right, cool, man. Plenty of content to come, guys, from me and Jordan. Definitely check out his articles coming out on jigjag.com. And I'll catch you guys in the next video.